supposed to be in church.
Is that better? Thank you so much for joining us this morning. Sound okay now?
Yes, sir.
All right, great. I'd like to introduce my lit themes composition class. Most of them are juniors in high school. They'll introduce themselves, of course, please, when you come up to the mic to ask a question. And then I'll bring the mic around for answers. That way everybody should be able to hear. We'd like to start with a panel discussion where you can just get to know each other a little bit and talk generally about some memories from the 40s. But first I'd like to introduce all of these guests who kindly took time out of your day to come and join us. My name is Anne Marie Schaefer. I've spoken to all of you and I'm very glad that you could join us. We have Mr. Herb Van Driel. When you address our guests, please make sure you are calling them Mr. or Mrs. and their last name. Would you like to tell us just a little bit about yourself? And if you don't want to be put on the spot?
I don't want a little bit, I want a lot. I'll do a little bit. Yeah, I live in Baraboo. I've been here for, oh my gosh, 20 years now. I actually worked in the cafeteria here for a year, 4 years ago. And I worked in the middle school cafeteria. I'm retired for a year, 6 years ago. And I'm a high school athletic nut. I just go to all the games, a lot of the games, girls and boys. And so you might have seen me at some of the games. I usually stand during the whole game because I don't want to sit. That's about it.
Great, thank you. And Mr. Van Driel studied history and journalism at Marquette University, so he's got a lot of knowledge with history. I'm gonna kind of stagger through. We have Diana helping a couple of our other guests. Nita Dipple. Nita's been involved with Baraboo Theater Guild for many, many years, so my students who have topics on modern art or jazz or fashion might find interesting conversations. We hope midway through your small group discussions to rotate, so you'll have a chance to talk with other students, so you should at least have 2 small groups after our large group. Mr. Al Dipple, would you like to introduce yourself at all? No? Make sure you ask personal, a little bit of background, just to get to know how long have these people been in Baraboo, maybe what their profession has been. All right. Mr. John Gahagan, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Well, I was born 5.5 blocks from this particular location. This was a farm. I hunted squirrels and rabbits here. And I was born the 15th of June, 1922. It was a bright, sunny day. My mother was in tears, but here I am, all these years later. What else can I say? I've had a very interesting life, believe me. One of the things that was, when somebody, I think Anne Marie said there, we weren't aware of all the things going on in the world maybe in those days, but the war was coming on, and I had one of my more illustrious periods of employment was I read the noon news for the Baraboo News Republic with a grand sum of $2 a week for six days' work, and I was allowed out of high school for the out of school for the period before noon because I came on at 12:15 at the upstairs at the News Republic office, and all the foreign countries and the foreign names and everything, and I had a vast listening audience because if I made a mistake, I heard about it probably that same day or the next day for sure. All the I had to read ads. I had to put all my stuff together, got it off of the teletype, and had to mark it for timing and all that, and then interspersed with ads. And I can still remember, when your car does a flip-flop, take it to Berkeley's Body Shop. and all the guff I got when I had to read the Jack Epstein's ladies' wear, and I was advertising ladies' underwear. And I lost that job because I wasn't doing it quite right. And one of the owners took it over, and when he read the ads, was selling ladies' lingerie.
Thank you, Mr. Goodham. Next, we have Dr. Leo Brancala, who was the superintendent of Baraboo Schools for, sorry, I can't remember the exact years, but I'll hand it to you to tell us a little bit more, Mr. Brancala.
I'm sorry, I can't remember the exact years either. My good friend Al Dipple was on the board at the time that I was hired. We didn't even have locks on the doors in those years. Can you imagine that? Nobody had to search you to come into school in those years. Can you imagine that?
Yes.
Well, and John's a good friend of mine, but he's a liar, and to prove it, he told you that the sun was shining when he was born. I worked here for 14 years as superintendent. I was a superintendent for 34 years, and then I went to the Department of Public Instruction and went all over the state visiting various schools. And let me tell you, kids, there aren't very many schools in this state that are better than Baraboo High School. I know that, I'm not just saying it, it's the truth. One thing I'd like to recommend to you, because you are in English class, and of course you want to talk about the 40s, but this book, The Citizens of London, is a story about what it was like to be in London in 1941. We weren't winning the war at that time, we were losing. And it looked as though we had absolutely no chance. And for kids like you living in London, everything was being bombed, everything was being burned, and it was no fun. In 1944, I was a signalman on the USS Vincennes, and we were coming back from Okinawa, and there was a Japanese kamikaze plane. These were suicide bombers that were going in. They had no more gas left. And that plane was coming right for our bridge. And I said, oh my God. I'm a good Catholic boy, so I was praying. And about 100 yards from where the ship was, one of our 5-inch guns made a direct hit and blew that ship out of the water of that plane. It was a scary moment, but that's reality. I hope you kids never have to see it. But that's the way things were at that time. After the war was over, it was all college, and we had just a wonderful time. Those were good years. When we came back, I mean, people couldn't do enough for us, could they, John? They were glad to see us, and we were glad to be back. But enjoy what you've got. Thank you for inviting us here. And if you can get a book like this, read about the war, because it's reality. The things you oftentimes see now aren't real. Thanks very much, Anna Marie.
Thank you, and that title was Citizens of London. I'm going to go to our back row. Another person who's very familiar with our school district is Mrs. Yvonne Smith, was a school nurse for many years.
Good morning. I worked at Baraboo High School for 15 years till I retired when I moved my mom up from Illinois to live with us. Prior to that, I worked for the county as a home care nurse for 15 years. We've been in Baraboo 38 years. Had 6 kids graduate from high school 3 years in a row. All went to college. 3 are now doctors. I'm very proud of all of them. They got a great education here, so enjoy your time here. It's a fun place to be. It was a fun place to work.
Thank you. And next we have Mr. Virgil Casper.
Well, I moved here in 1967 and brought 3 boys with me. They all went through the Baraboo school system and the like, and have done quite well at that point. And I guess one thing I do want to mention, and all these people sitting up here can relate, I was born in 1932, and one thing I did look up, in 1932 they said my life expectancy was 59.7 years. Well, I've outlived that 59.7 and expect to continue that, but because of better education, better nutrition, and all this type of thing, our life expectancy has moved up quite a little bit. The memories of the 40s were great. I grew up on a farm in Grant County, southwest Wisconsin, and I remember 2 things that are very important as far as growing up on the farm. Number one We had no electric lights until 1948, after World War II. Also, in that period of time, I went to a rural schoolhouse. I was the only one in my class for 8 years. I did not have a classmate until I went to high school.
I'm gonna go right in front of Mr. Kessler.
Could you imagine that? One person in your class. Next, we have Dr. Steve Rundio. He was a longtime professor and athletic director at BooU. Actually, I attended BooU my first 2 years where I coached since I was 18 and decided, yes, I liked that and I wanted to continue it as a teacher and a coach. So Steve Rundio.
She was a pretty good tennis player, too. I grew up on the East Coast, and I can remember I was a little younger going to the beach and seeing pieces of life jacket and oil or submarines that sunk ships. That was kind of a thing that stuck with me. I've only lived here now maybe 37 years. Prior to that, I lived in North Carolina, and while I was there, I'm sure you've read about the sit-ins in Greensboro. Well, that's where my wife used to go for lunch. So if you want to know about that area, you should talk to her. And I think I coached the first integrated basketball game in, what was that, Guilford County. So that was interesting. Back then, folks, in the South, they segregated very, very diligently. It's a different world now. But as I say, in the 40s, I grew up in New Jersey, a little town called Egg Harbor, and had a nice growing up, except during the war when my daddy was gone. And we sure did miss him. So, Anne Marie, you.
Thank you.